The nerve of these devils. I'd like to start off by saying Barakat Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Racha Kodash. Welcome to another live lesson. As you heard the title already, The Nerve of These Devils. Now, I was watching Elder Pastor's video, which I caught the second half earlier, because when he was premiering his video, it was about 30 minutes in or so, 31 minutes. And I went back and watched the beginning of it. And he came across an article, which I found, the article that he was reading from, I found it online. And pretty much there was something that he read off of the article that kind of hit me, that I want to spotlight, And Lord's will, it'll be an edifying lesson, because what you got to understand is Esau's in power. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. And they're not going to allow anyone else. Shalom, Mexico. Shalom to the Akim out there. Yahweh Shem El Shai, Brakathum. To all the sincere Akim, and the sincere Akwaf, Shalom. Y Shalom, hermano. Manténgate fuerte. I told them to stay strong out there. Okay? And one thing they're not going to do is they're not going to allow anyone to dictate to them how to run things, or, to say what is and what is not, especially concerning, things pertaining to the scriptures. Because that is the strongest, foothold, Okay, see, that is the strongest foothold for these devils. This is the greatest deception that they've used upon the world, is the deception using the Bible, using the scriptures. Okay, so like I said, I wanted to spotlight that in this lesson, because there was something that was said in there that these people are not going to be checked by. You're never going to hear Vocab Malone say anything about it. You're not going to hear any other so-called Christians come against that, because if it's so-called white, it's so-called right. Okay? Now, just have, 10 lost tribes, where they went and what they are now called. We know and believe through the spirit and power of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai that the 10 tribes came over to this side of the world. You have your yay-sayers and your naysayers. And that's all right, because you're going to have both. Everybody's not going to believe the truth. You got to have the believers and the non-believers. And the non-believers are going to far outweigh the believers. All right? Now, this is just some memes I found. North America, in early years of European settlement of the New World, many thought the American Indians were the 10 lost tribes. And they are. Now, when they say the American Indians, they're not just talking about Gad and Reuben. They're talking about from Canada all the way down to South America and everything in between. All right. And there have been explorers. There have been traders, meaning they traded with Gad. James Adair, which was Scottish, he was trading with Gad. He wrote a book, came to the conclusion that these people have to be Israelites based upon their customs, their religious rites, the way that they were dressed, the language they were speaking, so on and so forth. And there are different, let's see, Lord Kingsborough was another one that wrote, I believe it was an 8-volume book that stated, he was going in on Issachar being a part of the tribes. And there's all types of relics, there's all type of information. There are a lot of things that were burnt by the Spaniards, because they knew that if the crown and them over there in Europe found out that these people here in the Americas had written records, they couldn't justify enslaving them and calling them savages. That's why a lot of those things were burnt, because they couldn't believe, the amount of organization that Jake had over here. That's why they destroyed a lot of this stuff. Okay? There's another image here. South America, One early Jewish explorer claimed he heard Indians in South America speaking Hebrew. Recent discoveries in Ecuador have been claimed to support this belief. Right, and then there was the book Lost Tribes in Promised Land by Ronald Sanders, and he was speaking about an individual named Montesinos. And he had Indian guides, down in South America, and those Indian guides led him to three individuals, two of them being men, one being a woman, and he said that they were of the tribe of Joseph, they pretty much either Ephraim or Manasseh. And the individual said to his dismay, he was surprised to hear them speaking the Hebrew language, because they greeted him with the Shema Yasha Allah Yahweh Allah Hayana wa Yahweh Echad. Which means, hear, O Israel, the Lord our power is one. So there's a lot of stuff out there that points to the very fact that these people here are Israelites. And the Spirit worked on the mind of High Priest Ariah to pinpoint in the scriptures and on this side of the world who these people were, because Elder Abba Bivens knew that the so-called Negroes, the so-called Puerto Ricans, the so-called Native American Indians, that they were Israelites, but he didn't know all of the tribes. That wasn't given to him. He was given the job and the task of reintroducing us back to our culture, back to our nationality, our customs, and it was the Lord that gave High Priest Ariah the insight through scriptures, to pinpoint who these people were or are. And the thing that Elder Pastor said years ago, I never forgot, it always stuck with me, is that you can't know or understand a breakdown of a particular tribe unless you've actually lived around them, been around them, mixed among them. You can't expect to understand the tribe of, the so-called Central Americans or South Americans if you've never been around these people. You're not going to understand. But now, it's very easy for Judah to understand Ephraim, the so-called Negroes and the so-called Puerto Ricans. Why? Because we predominantly live together in a lot of, hoods. We go back to the 60s and the 70s, dealing with the whole, revolutionary movement, which was Judah, it was Ephraim, it was Manasseh, it was Gad, and a lot of, the growing up together, we mixed with each other's cultures. We vibed with each other. We had a lot of the same problems going on in the hood. We had a lot of the same injustices, a lot of, opportunities that were not available to Judah, were not available to Ephraim or the other tribes. So we had a lot of similarities, in when you go back to the culture of dancing, the b-boy, the breakdancing, rapping, hip hop, all of that. You speak to Jakes, that go back and know the history of hip hop in New York. They'll tell you that it was the so-called blacks and the so-called, Puerto Ricans that started that whole thing there. So that's not a coincidence. Okay? Let me get this real quick. Jeremiah 50:33. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the children of Israel and the children of Judah were oppressed together, and all that took them captives held them fast. They refused to let them go. Feeling a little silly. All right, so this is the article here. Now I want you to pay attention to what this individual wrote in this article. Joseph and America. Prophecies identifying the USA as belonging to Joseph. Now, I didn't read the article, so I don't know where he's going with it. But when Apostle R brought this out, the first thing I thought about was the so-called Mormons, Joseph Smith, which they claim that they, Edomites, that came from, I don't know where, my history is a little vague on the Mormons and exactly what part of Europe they came from. I haven't gone over that history in a while. But they claim that those Edomites, white-looking people, that they are Joseph and Manasseh. that they are Ephraim and Manasseh. We've encountered them in the streets. We've encountered them many different times. We've gone to their temples and all of that. So so they believe that they are of the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, which that's not the case. And also, as Elder Pastor pointed out, they claim that the so-called North American Indians are are part of the tribes, which they are, but they call them the Lamanites. And they say that because Gad was bad, that the skin of darkness came upon them and they were cursed, which is total bullshit. Because the whole part of the skin color being a curse, they knew they couldn't use anything else but so-called brown skin, because when you read the scriptures, it is a curse to look like a so-called white person. And that is facts. Facts. Okay? This is not conjecture. This is not theory. This is not opinion. These are facts. You can go throughout the scriptures and it tells you time and time again that having this so-called white-looking skin with blonde hair is the curse of leprosy. So, let's read this, Salakia. I want you to pay good, close attention. All right? It says partially adapted from, and they give you, Yair David he, which is, I don't know if it's this guy here. No, that's Rabbi Avraham Feld. All right. But now notice, because of the way he looks and what he claims to be the people of the Most High, of course, he's an authority. He's an authority. So it says, North America in general, is the domain of Joseph. Well, you have Gad, Reuben, Issachar, but let's go with that, because you have the Northern Kingdom, which is known also as Joseph, or Joseph and Ephraim, interchangeable. There were two tribes of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh, which that's correct. Our understanding, this is what popped right out at me as soon as the pastor read it. Our understanding, not what the Bible says, not what the scripture says, not what the prophecy says, but their understanding. And the French philosopher Voltaire, he stated that history is the lie commonly agreed upon. You see? So he says our understanding is that the British and her offshoots, meaning Edomites, including Canada, pertain to Ephraim. The USA is dominated more by Manasseh. The USA, however, in our time also represents all of the 10 tribes. Even though Manasseh is more dominant descendant of Ephraim, in the USA may be more numerous. No, well, the Apostle Tahar read the blessings that Manasseh would be great, but Ephraim would be greater, and Ephraim would be far more. It tells us that in the book of Deuteronomy. Matter of fact, let's get that real quick. It was Deuteronomy 33. Let me see if I can find the exact verse. All right, we got Joseph. Right, 33:17. His glory is like the firstling of his bullock, strong, powerful. And the horns, meaning the power, are like horns of unicorns, because it's the tribe of Ephraim that was responsible for gathering together the other 9 tribes. All right, because in the scheme of things, Ephraim is the head of the northern kingdom, just like Judah is the head of the southern kingdom. But Judah is the head over all of us in general. It says, with them he shall push the people together to the ends of the earth. We're in the ends of the earth, and it's no coincidence that when you go back to 1 West, you had Ephraimites in there. You had an individual by the name of Dan Ya'ala, I believe his name was, and he was a Manassite, so-called Cuban. You see, he was a powerful teacher. From the little bit that I heard of him, I'm not sure if I ever heard him speaking on cassette. I probably did, but I just don't remember. But there's no this is not a coincidence. And he also belongs to Joseph. It says, And with them shall he push the people together to the ends of the earth, meaning over here on this side of the world. These are the ends of the earth, the most extreme parts. And they are the what? 10,000s of Ephraim, and they are the thousands of Manasseh. So Ephraim would be far greater than Manasseh. But Manasseh would be great also, because even when Jacob was putting the blessing on them, and he had his hands crossed, the right hand on Ephraim, the left hand on Manasseh, and Joseph got upset because he said, no, Father, not so. This one is my firstborn, Manasseh. And he said, yeah, I know this, my son. And remember that Jacob was old at that time. And I believe he was, kind of couldn't really see that well. So how did he know to cross his hands and put his right hand on Ephraim's head and the left hand on Manasseh's head? The Spirit guided him. The Spirit told him what to do. The Spirit set it up that way because Ephraim was going to be the head, even though Manasseh was born first. That was the firstborn. All right? So that's a strike for these guys. That Manasseh is a dominant descendant. How did it go? That pertain to Ephraim, the USA is dominated more by Manasseh. The USA, however, in our time presents all the 10 tribes, even though Manasseh is more dominant descendant of Ephraim. No, he's not. They're not the most. This shows you that these small heads don't know the Bible. Here it is. They're all in the Torah. They know they speak that Yiddish or that modernized Hebrew. They can go all into them different, nooks and crannies, of the law, and the Torah. They go to their synagogues and all this, but yet something basic as what was the top tribe of Joseph, they don't know that. In general, biblical, rabbinic, historical, and other sources show that the 10 tribes settled among Western peoples. This does not mean that everyone there is a Hebrew, but rather that is where descendants of the lost Hebrews are to be found. The standard of Joseph depicted a picture of Egypt. This may have been a pyramid. A pyramid is depicted on the U.S. Great Seal as portrayed on a dollar bill representing the USA. Yeah, and pretty much America is spiritually Egypt. And they know that the Israelites were the ones that built the pyramids. When we go to, this precept just came to mind, kind of left me for the moment. Hopefully, I pray the Lord it comes back. Well, let's see if it comes back. Right, because you had the Barak Dehal Bashim El Shai. Let's go real quick to Isaiah chapter 14. And let's go to the 13th verse. For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. This is Esau. They've done that because the ancient Babylonians did not ascend. There was no nation that ascended into the heavens except for the Edomites. That didn't happen until the early 1900s. All right? With the Wright brothers. I believe the term was Kitty Hawk. You hear Apostle Tar bring it out from time to time. I will exalt my throne above the stars of the Most High. This is their so-called space station. Their mission to the moon, to Mars, which they never made it to the moon. They're not going to make it to Mars. It says, I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation. And who are that? Who is this? Who is the mount of the congregation? The Israelites, the Mount Zion of the Most High. In the sides of the north. What's that? North America. It wasn't talking about ancient Babylon. It wasn't talking about Nebuchadnezzar. All right? So, going back, Joseph, including Manasseh, was to become the greatest, most powerful, and it gives you precepts. Elder Pastor, I believe he read a few of these precepts. And most wealthy of all nations, Now, I'm not going to read any more right now. I'm pretty sure there's a lot in here that's dynamite. I put this in the description box in case any brother is interested. I want to get back to it. But what I want to do is I want to highlight through the Spirit and power of Yahweh Shem Shai, the book of 2nd Ezra 13. And you have Edomites, namely the Mormons, so-called Mormons, that claim to be, Israelites, so-called Europeans, which are really Edomites. They claim to be Israelites, but they're not. And they claim to be descendants specifically of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh, which they're not. And they claim that Gad, are also Israelites, which they are, but they call them Lamanites, and they're not Lamanites. They are Israelites from the tribe of Gad. All right, so just bear with me. I'm trying to get this. Because just been meditating, putting this lesson together, and all different types of thoughts were going through my brain. So I'm just trying to pull them up as I remember through the Spirit. So now, when we scroll down to 2nd Ezra 13, this is dealing with the end. This is a vision that the Lord gave to Ezra. And he saw Yahushua coming. He saw him battling in Armageddon. He saw him destroying the armies of Esau and the nations, And he also saw a great multitude coming together. All right? And there are parts of this prophecy that these individuals that say that, the 12 tribes are all black, or whatever the case may be, can't get around this fact. Not fiction, not opinion, not theory, fact. Okay? 2nd Ezra chapter 13, we're going to start at 39. We're going to read down, and when we get to the points, we'll bring it out. And whereas thou sawest that he gathered another peaceable multitude unto him. This is what? These are the 10 lost tribes of the nation of Israel. Those are the 10 tribes which are carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea the king, whom Shalmaneser the king of Assyria led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. Now what was this other land that they came to? This other land that they came to was the land of Assyria, because Shalmaneser, specifically the fifth, the pastor brought that out, Hosea was trying to make a deal with the king of Egypt. I believe his name was So. And that was a conspiracy so that he didn't have to pay tribute to the Assyrians. That failed. Shalmaneser waged war against the king and took them down, brought Samaria into captivity, and brought them over to Assyria. Now, while we were in Assyria, under the Assyrian captivity, the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom was still not in subjection. There it says, but they took counsel among themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country. Right? Now this further country was a long way away, where never mankind dwelt. These are facts. Now you have these individuals like Fopi and others that teach that the 12 tribes are all so-called black, that the 12 tribes all went to so-called Africa. That's not true, because it says here they went to a further country where never mankind dwelt. So a thought popped in my mind at the moment, because we know through biblical prophecy, through historical facts, that the so-called blacks that were brought here to America, the tribe of Judah, Benjamin, Levi predominantly, were brought here from the western coast of Africa, right, by way of cargo slave ships. You have these individuals that deny that now. They say that there was never no such thing. I mean, there's all kind of madness going on. These are the greatest times, prophecy-wise, to be alive, but also bad because there's so much disinformation out there also. So the thought came into mind. We know that they came from the so-called western coast of Africa. So if that's the case, that all 12 tribes went to so-called Africa, where did they go to first and foremost? And was that inhabited before they got there? So I typed in the history of West Africa, and this pops up. It says the history of West Africa has been divided into its prehistory, the Iron Age in Africa, the major polities flourishing, the colonial period, and finally the post-independence era, in which the current nation were formed. West Africa is west of an imagined north-south axis lying close, right? Now, it says West African populations were considerably mobile and interacted with one another throughout the population history of West Africa. A Chilean tool using archaic humans may have dwelt throughout West Africa since at least 780,000 BP, which we know that these numbers are bullshit, you know? But we know that these people were living in these regions here far longer. And by the time that the Israelites from the northern kingdom went into captivity into Assyria, there were people already inhabiting the western coasts. Right? It says, and 126,000 BP, whatever, during the Pleistocene Middle Stone Age peoples, Illyrian people, possibly Assyrians, who dwelt throughout West Africa, trying to get, earlier than 32,000, dwelt throughout coastal West Africa by 12,000 BP, migrated northward, and persisted as late as 1,000 or some period of time after 1500 CE, which is a so-called Common Era. During the Holocene, sedentary farming, the iron industry in both smelting and forging for tools and weapons appeared in sub-Saharan Africa by 1200 BCE. All right, this is 1200 BC. Now, when we type in, when did the 10 tribes go into captivity? We already know, but we just typing that in. 721 BC, right? So that is from 1200 to 721. That's roughly almost 500 years that there were people living in these regions. So how in the hell can this be? Can all the tribes have gone to so-called Africa when Africa was inhabited? The western coast and other parts of Africa were already inhabited by peoples. And this is a question that they cannot answer. And notice to this day, these individuals that claim that the 12 tribes sign that we have, the 12 tribes chart, with the so-called Negroes, West Indians, Haitians, Dominicans, Guatemalans, Panama, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, North American Indians, Seminole Indians, the Argentinians, the Chileans, Colombians, the Uruguayans, and Mexicans, that this is wrong, but that they're all black. And then when they present their sign, what all they do is put over here, black scattered. They don't identify who's Judah, who's Benjamin, who's Levi, who's Ephraim, who's Manasseh, who's Naphtali. It's just a broad stroke. Because they can't. They can't identify it. And that's just one thing. Other thing is, where is this land where never mankind dwelt? It says a further country. So now you could argue that from Israel to the western coast, or from Assyria to the western coast of Africa, that is some distance. That is a little far. But people were already living there. There were already people settled there. So where is this land in a further country where never mankind dwelt? And it means what it says. It says that they might dare keep their statutes, laws, statutes, commandments. This is why here in America, in Los Lunas, Mexico, New Mexico, you have the you have the Decalogue, or the 10 Commandments, etched in the ancient Hebrew, the Paleo Hebrew, on that stone. And I believe they tried to remove it, but they couldn't. And some devil came over there and scratched it all up, defaced it. Some rat bastard, some low-life cocksucking piece of dog shit, defaced it. But the facts are the facts. It's still there. And many other relics and things that that happened, and all kinds of information. So that's why they came over here, which they never kept in their own land. This was the reason why we went into captivity under the Assyrians. They were the dominant force at that time. And they entered into Euphrates by the narrow places of the river, right? Which means they entered by ships. That's the argument they have, is, well, it doesn't say ships. They entered by ships, because this was the mode of transportation back then. For the Most High then showed signs for them and held still the flood. So how were they able to cross that flood? How were they able to cross across waters? They had to have ships till they were passed over. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half. So now, how long does it take to get from the land of Assyria to the land of to so-called Africa? Just bear with me 1 second. Doesn't really give you much, but it doesn't take a year and a half to get from Assyria to so-called Africa. So this cannot be the land where never mankind dwelt, right? It says, and the same region is called Arsareth. Now what is Arsareth? Another land. Aratazah, which is the word land, and Achar, I believe it is, Achar, Aratazah, Arsareth, you could kind of see, this is kind of like the Greekish way of writing it, and when you go to Deuteronomy 29, and I believe it's 29, it breaks it down. And another clue here is, for through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half. It doesn't take a year and a half to go here. So now, how did they know that there was a land over here? Because, King Solomon had a navy. And in that navy, Hiram, which was a Canaanite, he actually had expert seamen. The Phoenicians, this Phoenicians, there's another name too, but I can't think of it right now. Sidonians, they were expert seamen, and what that meant was that they were accustomed to going to the seas. They knew how to navigate the seas. They knew how to use the heavens to navigate. They knew all about the different currents in the waters and how to navigate through those currents. The brother put it up. That's all right. You brothers are all right. 1 Kings 9:27, and Hiram sent in the navy his servants, shipmen that had knowledge of the sea, with the servants of Solomon. I'm not going to berate you like Bishop Nate does to his men. Come on, guy, you should have that up already. You should already know where I'm going with it. Salaki, I had to throw that in there. And they came to Ophir and fetched from thence gold 420 talents and brought it to King Solomon. Right, beautiful. And then here goes the next one. And I was watching Elder Pastor R, and he said there was a particular king of Israel, I believe it was Judah, that tried to do the same thing, but he wasn't able to. And that king was Jehoshaphat. I looked it up. All right. So Jehoshaphat tried, but he said the ships were broken up, so he wasn't able to do it. Why? As the Pastor R said, which is true, that was meant for King Solomon. Right? 1 Kings 10:22. For the king had at sea a navy of Tarshish with the navy of Hiram. Once in 3 years came the navy of Tarshish bringing gold and silver, ivory and apes and peacocks. So what in the hell are these individuals talking about? This is to show you that trip to come over here took a long time. They didn't have cruise ships back then. They didn't have, planes. All right? And this is the scripture right here. The brother's on fire. Brothers are on fire. 1 Kings 22:48, Jehoshaphat made ships of Tarshish to go to Ophir for gold, but they went not, for the ships were broken at Ezion-Geber. Right? And Ezion-Geber is in the Gulf of Aqaba. That's north of the Gulf of Aqaba. That was where King Solomon had another navy. All right? So where is this place that where never mankind dwelt, where it takes a year and a half to get to, that was called Arsareth? And when you type this in, sometimes you'll have some information that'll bring up that Arsareth is America. Ophir is America. And then dwelt they there until what? The latter time, which is talk about now. And in the latter time, that's when these Edomites that call themselves Spaniards came over here and put hell upon us. And then later on, about 150 years or so in the future, they will start bringing, or actually maybe about 50 years to 100 years later, they started bringing the tribe of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi over to this side of the world. Okay? Because that was the prophecy of gathering together the peaceable multitude. Then, once the southern kingdom got here and was spread throughout the Americas, South America, the islands and all that, that began to count when they came here as a boat. That began to count for the times and the dividing of times, which is the 350 years. And it's no coincidence that at the very end of that, you had Elder Abba Bivens, which was out there before 1969, but that was a key year that the truth really started being taken, root. Then you had the 3 pillars, King Masha, High Priest Arya, High Priest Yaikwab, which took on, the torch, so to speak, after Elder Abba Bivens had passed away, and continued on, that mustard seed that was already planted, which is the gospel of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, and you see what we have now, how it's grown. All right? It says, and now when they shall begin to come, meaning when the southern kingdom begins to come over to the side of the world, the highest shall stay the springs of the highest shall stay the springs of the stream again. So how in the hell is this talking about so-called Africa? This means that the Lord made the weather, and the storms and all that, he held back so that the southern kingdom can get over here safely so that they can be joined together with the northern kingdom. So that they may go through. Therefore sawest thou the multitude with peace. Because this what began the gathering, and now the elect from all 12 tribes is being gathered. All right? So I just wanted to say a few words on that. I pray the Lord that you brothers and few sisters were edified. Till the next time I say shalom.